Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, June 23rd, 2025. I am John Podhortz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, asking you to go to our website at commentary.org and read the contents of our July-August issue, one of the best issues we have ever put out, and I say that guardedly. I'm very proud of this issue. Its theme is the war against the Jews, and while it was put to bed before the United States entered in the war in Iran, it evokes many of the themes that the president himself has evoked in the last 48 hours about why we did so. And I want to talk today with my colleagues here about Donald Trump, Israel, and the Jewish people, because that is weirdly on the ballot tomorrow here in New York City, I think, in the mayoral race that has taken some interesting turns. But we will get to that with my colleagues, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist and director of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John. And may I also urge our viewers or listeners to go to the Commentary Magazine YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. I announced the goal of 15,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel, and I think we're well on our way to that. I was hoping to get that by the end of the summer. So if you haven't gone there, just go there, like and subscribe. Don't have to watch us on television. So why you wouldn't want to, I don't know.
Sorry. Oh, hold on.
How many are we at?
We are at 13,700 followers. So we only need 1,300 more to get to 15,000, Matt's goal.
I think we can do it.
And we were at 10,000 when Matt
we can do it.
Set the goal. So please, people, you will do us an enormous favor. You expose more people to the algorithm. The algorithm will look at that number and say, well, 15,000 people like it. Surely another 15 million will like it as well. They'll see it. They'll click on it. They will join in the pleasure of the commentary.
Shouldn't we be offering something in response? Like if we hit the goal?
If we hit the goal,
a revelation or something. I mean, not that I want to reveal.
Well, let's think what could that be? Because there's of course like we could tell a secret, or we could reveal. I don't know.
I was thinking we could play a clip of Jerry Lewis in the final hours of the telethon to thank.
The final minute
where he was, he was kind of
as the
wiped
deck
out,
green was
sweaty.
wearing off.
Yeah,
exactly.
Or singing,
or working, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, we could do it. We could do a number.
That's right. That's true. That's true. All right. So yes, please do that. And if you are of a mind to, we never say this. Every podcast says this. If you subscribe on Apple, you would do us a huge favor by giving us a 5-star review, which again also helps expose us when people sort of do the browsing function on their phones in the Apple Podcast universe, to say, hey, got a lot of 5-star reviews. Maybe somebody who listens to political podcasts would like this one as well. So I don't like to pester people except to subscribe to the magazine, which I should do more of. But here we are making two asks: like and subscribe on YouTube, and maybe give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And that's all we're asking for the things we do for you. Surely you can do this for us. Would it kill you? Would it take bread out of the mouths of your children? I don't think so. Amazing morning. Israel is hitting hundreds of targets inside Iran, including, and remarkably symbolically, the world's most notorious prison, the Evin prison, which is where Iran takes anyone who talks smack or does anything remotely anti-regime focused, throws them in there, tortures them, and it's sort of the Lubyanka of the Islamic fundamentalist world. So there was a strike essentially on the door frame. I mean, that's what's interesting, is the specificity of these attacks. Like, they basically blew the door off the prison to help people escape if they could. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps barracks, I believe, that is the elite of the elite fighting force that defends regime leadership and is it's like a combination of the Marines, the SEALs, the Royal Grenadier, like they're top soldiers in an army of 1 million, like 125,000 people said to be in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and they are being killed by the hundreds. And I think all of this is just a relentless message to the Iranian leadership. Interestingly enough, that they should come to the table and say, "Uncle," because the noose is tightening. They're literally zeroing in on them as targets, going after secondary targets with the clear message that they, the leaders, Khamenei and his ilk, are the primary targets, and that Israel knows where they are and can get them at a moment's notice. The other major thing is the continued bombing at Fordow, to make sure that there is no escape from the underground bunkers in case any of the fissile material is in Fordow or in Natanz, that the exits are blocked, literally by rubble.
Right.
So,
well, I think what we see with the Israeli strikes is a expansion of targets from the command and control, the missile stocks and missile launchers, and the nuclear program, to regime level targets. The IRGC, the gate to Evin prison. There are reports that Israel also destroyed the Doomsday clock. This was the Iranian equivalent of the debt clock in New York City. Our debt clock counts upward the national debt. Apparently, the Iran Doomsday clock counted downward to the destruction of Israel, but no more. Israel has destroyed the Doomsday clock. And this comes as President Trump, 15 hours ago, yesterday, Sunday afternoon, posted this to Truth Social. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, all caps, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Question mark, question mark, question mark. MIGA, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. What I think you're seeing here is combined Israeli and American pressure on Iran to say, do not escalate, do not attack American targets, prepare to stand down, or you will risk the regime collapsing.
I mean, I think it's also, though, yes, it is a message in that sense. It also serves this very practical purpose of sort of, collapsing the regime's ability to organize and fight back and do anything. I mean, it can do. It's not that it can't do anything, but it's certainly making it harder and harder operationally for any offensive action against Israel in Iran.
So what we have left, and what the Iranians threatened over the weekend, was asymmetrical warfare, right? Not that. So they are firing missiles. Last night, they fired one missile at Israel. One. Now, by the way, firing one missile at Israel is weirdly, if you're doing it as a psychological torture game, is no different from firing 100, because the siren goes off at 3:00 in the morning. They don't have the precise telemetry, so the siren goes off over half the country. Everybody wakes up. Everybody has to go into the shelter. Night sleep is disrupted. The war of attrition, psychological attrition, continues. And so you can see how, even if you don't really have targets and you're Iran, you would want to do this like one a night, do it at 3:00 in the morning, just to make sure that your adversary's civilian population just doesn't get enough sleep at the very least. But either that is simply that, or the Iranians are having real difficulty getting missiles launched and while they were able to launch, I don't know, 30 the night before, something like that, they launched one on Sunday night and Monday morning, and that's a interesting development. We'll see whether that development holds over the course of the next couple of days.
Point out an asymmetry in the media coverage? Because, it's not like me to criticize the media or anything. No, I rarely do it. But in this case,
it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous what you're doing here because,
it erodes democracy.
Our freedoms. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, that's the reason I just learned that one very prominent foreign policy writer in the Atlantic opposed the Iran strike, which was not his belief that it would not work. That was also his belief. But he wrote, more importantly, that it's because America's already on the road to dictatorship that he opposes the Iran strike.
Yeah. So, that writer was my roommate.
Yeah.
By the way, 40 years ago.
Yeah. So I got to that sentence in his
We're
piece.
not having a reunion anytime soon.
I just got to that sentence in his, I'm sure, 7,000 word piece, and I was like, I'm not going to go any further. But that's an aside. That's the Atlantic.
7,000 for him would be a sonnet, by the way. But go ahead.
My point about the media is, this is what happens when you deal with democracies versus dictatorships. We have a very clear picture of what's happening inside Israel. Whenever Iran launches one of these missile barrages, we know the alerts. We get the notices to go into the shelters. We see the damage. There's video. It's very hard for us to assess what is actually happening on the ground in Iran, on the other hand. Now, there is video on social media that shows, the smoke, the blast sites. There, of course, has been satellite imagery from Fordo.
Abe is very disappointed in the satellite. Abe,
it is disappointing.
Yeah, well, it's not that I'm very disappointed, and I say this like it means nothing because because my eyes are not trained in reading satellite imagery, right? But you sort of expected, when you see the before and after images, to see, you see the before, this elaborate network of buildings and trails and roads to places, and then you see it afterwards, and it looks kind of the same with like some gray smudges here and there.
Right, it's because it's underground.
Yeah,
I know.
That's why it's not the best, example of that. Right, but I agree with you. I had the same reaction. It's like, hold it. And then the captions on the social media posts were like, well, you can see the 3 tunnels where the mops,
holes.
The mops penetrate. It was like, well, where? It's not very. In any case, we don't know, other than these images, what is actually happening within Iranian command and control. We have these reports that the Ayatollah Khamenei is in hiding, that it's almost impossible to reach him. That's one explanation given for why there was not this meeting in Ankara last week that could have prevented the American strike. So we just don't really know what's going on inside Iran. I mean, there are obviously Iranians who are able to communicate to Western sources, but at the same time, the internet is down in Iran. The media is down. We, of course, had that fantastic video clip last week of Israel bombing Iranian state television while the fanatic woman newscaster was broadcasting, and she had to rush out of the studio. She seemed to be unharmed, by the way. She appeared on a later program I saw. But nonetheless, the media here just simply takes whatever the Iranian authorities are saying as gospel without actually having the sources on the ground to see what is going on the streets. And this is, of course, very similar to how the Western media has treated Hamas and its authorities in Gaza. But it presents a very misleading picture, I think, of the reality of the war.
I want to talk about the response in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, if people listened to our emergency podcast, we talked about sort of the leftist or liberal or democratic poo-pooing or, talking about the failure to secure congressional authorization for a surprise strike and how preposterous we thought that was. But things moved yesterday in a more specific institutional, organizational, and a direction, I would say, represented by two poles of world opinion. One of them being Ben Rhodes, the former Obama alter ego person who sold the Iran deal to the American people through what he called the what did he call it? The echo chamber of the media. He said they're 27 years old. They don't know anything. I can tell them anything, and they'll do what I tell them. That's the famous piece by David Samuels, now a tablet, in the New York Times Magazine about the manipulation of the young new Washington press corps by the Obama administration. Remarkable piece of reporting that was. Ben Rhodes, now sort of a MSNBC guy, and he, let me find the specific tweet. He tweeted out yesterday something that is kind of brain numbing when you think it through, which was this: Trump's message to the world: if you have nukes like North Korea, I'll trade love letters with you. If you don't, I'll pull out of agreements you're keeping and bomb you during diplomacy. Just devastating to non-proliferation. So let's just unpack this. Ben Rhodes, the leading, in some ways, foreign policy voice of the Obama administration, is saying Iran is holding to its deal in what it's doing, and Trump is willing to play kissy face with North Korea, but will bomb Iran, and that this is devastating to non-proliferation. Non-proliferation being the doctrine that says that there needs to be a treaty to prevent, an international treaty to prevent the other countries in the world from going nuclear. Let's think about what he is saying. He is saying that Trump acknowledging reality, having to deal with a nuclear North Korea, took a certain tack that I think we are all, like him, extremely discomfited by.
But
right? He went nice, right? He went nice with Kim Jong-un.
Right, but can I make an observation there?
Yeah.
Remember our history. He did go nice with Kim Jong-un, but when push came to shove in the Hanoi summit, Trump did not give in to North Korea's demands.
Right.
He walked away. And so it's actually pretty similar treatment.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so so maybe I wasn't being fair to Trump there, but point is, he's saying, oh, so you make nice with North Korea, but you bomb Iran. Yes. And that is non-proliferation in this sense. We have to deal with North Korea as it is. It is a nuclear power. It went nuclear despite our efforts to buy it off, gave it money throughout the 1990s or prevent it from happening. And then in 2002, the George W. Bush administration announced to the world that North Korea had gone nuclear. And by the way, the non-proliferation people at that moment went ballistic, if you'll excuse the terrible pun, because they thought it was terrible to acknowledge that North Korea had gone nuclear, because that would harm the non-proliferation treaty. It would harm the regime of non-proliferation.
We can't hurt the treaty.
Right.
That's
and
the bottom line.
That is what he is saying here, which is Trump hit, and the Israelis have hit Iran because it was going nuclear. And the non-proliferation, it's an interesting tongue twister. The non-proliferation regime failed to prevent Iran from getting to what John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, called essentially the 1 yard line, that it had marched 99 yards to a nuclear bomb, and that it was 1 yard away from getting the enriched uranium to put in a missile to make it an existential threat to Israel.
This is such an important point about the liberal mindset, because for liberals and progressives, what matters is the paper. Reality doesn't matter. The paper matters. Don't you understand? We have this piece of paper. All these people signed it.
We all agreed. Accords.
Yeah. We signed the Paris Accord.
We solved climate change.
We signed climate change. We outlawed war in the 1920s with Kellogg-Briand. And now we have this non-proliferation treaty. We have to protect the piece of paper. What are you doing, Trump? By destroying the program.
Yeah. But in reality, as you say, which is different from liberal papers, this is the first actual event of non-proliferation that I could think of. I think since
except for the Osirak and Syrian reactors, right?
Since Libya renounced its nuclear program in 2023, 2003 rather. Yeah.
Right. Iran is part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran, over the course of its signing and presence in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, developed at least 5 secret sites to create enriched uranium for a bomb. That's how wonderfully successful the Non-Proliferation Treaty has been. That one of the few countries in the world that is actually actively seeking a nuclear program got one, got paid off $150 billion by the United States to retard its progress. Remember, and I want to thank our friend Omri Sarin for making this point yesterday on social media, part of the JCPOA was an acknowledgement that Iran had the right to continue its work at the Fordow site. That's in the JCPOA. We agreed to the idea that Fordow was somehow outside of the terms. In other words, it could keep doing research and do stuff as long as it didn't go nuclear. Like there's any difference. Like it only takes a day once you get the uranium enriched to 60%. It takes a couple of days to get it to weapon level. That's the point about the 60% enrichment number. So we had agreed under Obama to allow Iran to get to the 1 yard line pretty much at will while paying it $150 billion in those pallets of cash.
And the deal would have gone kerplunk this year. This was the sunset 10 years in. At that point, Iran could do whatever it wanted.
Right. And then Obama would tell you that actually, because of the way the deal is structured, they got like an extra, sort of like in your real estate contract, they got an extra 2 years on the back end. So it would actually have been 2027.
Oh, can we say also, as of now, Obama has not said a single thing about the strike, nor has Biden said a single thing about the strike. Again,
well, Biden was having ice cream.
A reminder. Well, he's on the Amtrak, as the New York Post reported this weekend, that he is riding Amtrak every week, and people are coming up to him in selfies, but apparently he's violating the cardinal rule of the quiet car.
He's talking in the quiet car.
He's talking loudly
but
in the quiet
I wanted to make mention the second person. I said there were 2 voices here that were very important.
Right.
Ben Rhodes, who represents a kind of assumed American liberal view about, as you say, paper over reality. And then there was the fact that on Matt's and my morning hate listen, up first from NPR, in their story, they first quoted or played tape of Donald Trump's speech on Saturday night. And then the respondent with the alternating view was Mr. Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, speaking yesterday at the UN, saying that this could lead to devastating worse, everything will be worse, and it will be now Iran will leave the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it's all terrible. Now, I just want to talk about the dramatics here, or let's just talk about Matt said, there's transparency. We're a democracy. Israel's a democracy. All of the debating, discussion, everything that's going on is going on in public with everybody getting the right to say their piece, right? Donald Trump was elected by, 77 million people? I don't even remember what the number was of his vote tally. Mr. Grossi, an Argentine professional foreign service officer who was an ambassador to Podunkia, Shlabovia, and something else before he went into international organizations. I looked it up. That's why I can't remember. Whatever. The Argentine ambassador,
it's a high-profile assignment.
Very key position in the world of international diplomacy, of course, ends up as head of the International Atomic Energy Agency in 2019 after sort of like a conclave, after like 4 ballots in a vote of 35 people who are all commissioners of the IAEA, who have become commissioners of the IAEA by vote of previous commissioners of the IAEA, replacing themselves with new commissioners of the IAEA. So you have the leader of the world's most powerful democracy explaining
77 million votes.
70, explaining why the United States struck, and then you have a guy representing no one with no authority for anything.
But he does he has a remarkable fashion sense.
He does,
Raphael, as we learned
Times,
in the FT, when the FT had lunch with him a few weeks ago, and this was before Operation Rising Lion, and yet Iran was definitely on the radar. So I actually took the time to read this lengthy piece for me. It was about 2,000 words. I read the piece, and I learned that Raphael Gross aspires to be the UN Secretary General. He is very public about that. And also, he's a good dresser, and he knows all the best restaurants in Vienna, and he watches his weight. So he ordered the Bronzino. So that's right. That's the leader of the opposition here to the strikes.
But let's again talk about the dynamic here. The leader of the free world, the president of the United States, the duly elected leader of Israel, in the most contentious democracy in the world, get together, put their heads together for this mission, the purpose of which is to prevent an irredentist, millenarian, religious fanatic, totalitarian regime from getting a nuclear bomb. And the person who runs the agency, whose own report it was, that said that Iran was days away from being able to reach weaponized enrichment levels, is attacking us at the UN because it's part of his campaign to become Secretary General of the United Nations.
So a completely irrelevant organization. Yeah.
But that is how NPR wished to frame this.
But, I think it's important, too, because I've been noticing something. It's not just Raphael Gross, and it's not just NPR. There other voices in American media don't seem to understand what a nuclear program is. Because since the strike on Saturday night, we keep hearing that the stocks of enriched uranium in Iran seem to be largely intact. I don't know where some of them are. Did some of the highly enriched uranium leave Fordo before the strike? We don't know. There's chambers apparently near either Natanz or Isfahan.
No, I think it's Natanz. There's
some underground storage area next door that has not been hit. And all of these examples are used to say that the strike by the United States and the strikes, plural, by Israel have not destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. I'm sorry. It takes more than enriched uranium to have a program, right? The Iranians can have this enriched uranium in a truck and drive it all around central Iran, but without the facilities, without the tunnels, without the scientists, without the launchers, and without the missiles, there is no real program. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't care about fissile material just running around a country, because you don't know who the Iranians might give it to. You don't know who might capture it. But I think we need to make this distinction between the stockpile of uranium and the actual program. It's part of the program, but there are a lot of other parts of the program that Israel and the United States have now destroyed, which set back the Iranian bomb by a long time.
This is so important because, look, I wouldn't know anything about this except that one had to learn about this in between 2013 and 2015 as the negotiations that led to the JCPOA were taking place. And so a lot of us had to bone up on what it meant, what centrifuges were, what it meant to have, how you milled uranium, how you converted it into, you enriched it over time and all of that. And the central point here is that whatever uranium is there, it is not bomb level. If it were, the Iranians would have announced that they had achieved nuclear breakout and would have forestalled this attack by the very fact that they had gone nuclear. That's the Ben Rhodes idiocy, is that we can't just bomb North Korea now. I mean, we can, but I mean, you can't just, you have to be mindful of the fact that there is a potentially emotionally unstable person with nuclear weapons in North Korea who could do something if you go at him. That's why he has them. That's why Iran wanted to have them, not only defensively, but offensively against Israel. That material is useless until it gets to weapons grade. And it's useless after it gets to weapons grade if it cannot be placed in certain types of containers that can be placed in certain types of rockets, so that when the rocket is launched, it does not ignite the nuclear material inside the rocket. It's shielded from the heat of the rocket so that it doesn't blow up on launch and kill everybody in Tehran. So if you destroy the facilities that make the equipment that not only get it to weapons grade, those are the centrifuges, but the facilities that are making the casings and that are constructing the bombs and that are finessing the launchers, the uranium itself is meaningless. I mean, it's not meaningless because you could sell it to North Korea and give them
radioactive,
more.
right?
Yeah, radioactive, and but therefore it's dangerous to them. Yeah. If they have it on a truck driving it around somewhere or in some facility, whoever is there is going to get radiation poisoning and die.
Well, but we should add, though, with that point that, one of the concerns that people who were against a strike had was that, if we hit these facilities with these massive ordnance weapons, that then there will be these giant radiation leaks, but that has not been detected.
First of all, that has not been detected. And again, I think it goes to a misunderstanding of what this stuff is. It's not like, dynamite, where if you or it's not like, you're lighting, it's quicksand or it's like, it's stuff in a thing. And yeah, I suppose if you really blow it up real good, somehow it can get blown up too. But it's not that. It's not like, careful, explosives. It's uranium.
Right.
It's explosive. It's not that the uranium it's that if you start off a chain reaction effect inside a tiny little nuclear, essentially reactor, which is what you build to make the bomb work.
That's what
then it gets explosive.
Right. This is why we all need to rewatch Oppenheimer to better understand what's going on here, because we're not getting any help from the media. I really think that's the case. And of course, the people who are experts then you get sort of experts in this who are propagandists for the paper. Oh, yeah.
Right? Okay, so that I think Matt's really, really good point. I said there's a guy named Jeffrey Lewis who tweets under the name Arms Control Wonk, and said, I'm really not impressed by this strike because it left this facility here and that. And of course, he's against any action against Iran. And why? Because the action against Iran calls into question the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And to me, after what happened on Saturday night and after the 10 days of Israeli strikes, followed by the American, and I'm still not clear whether it was 6 or 12 bunker buster bombs. I heard as many as 17. Trump said 6. Yeah. It's very confusing what
Well, there are bunker busters, and then there are the massive ordnance penetrators.
That we have entered a new realm. And these people who are living in what matters is the nuclear non-proliferation regime are like Stasi officers going to the office after the Berlin Wall has fallen and the East German government has collapsed and is no more. There were these people showing up to work at the East German Secret Service headquarters in 1989 after their country no longer existed, because that's what they do. It's Thursday morning, they take their lunch pail and they go to the office serving a regime that no longer exists. And that is what's going to have to dawn on people, that we have now moved into a realm in which the United States has declared as its new policy that if you are going to try to go nuclear, we are going to drop a giant bomb on your program. Israel set the stage with the attacks on the Osirak reactor and the Syrian reactor in 1981 and 2007. The United States has now taken this to the next level. If we discern, if we perceive that you are looking to go nuclear, having failed to do this in North Korea, so that now Trump has to have these letter exchanges with this tin pot dictator of the world's poorest nation, we're not going to let that happen anymore. Now, I don't know if we are. Who knows who's, if Zoran Mandami becomes president in 2029, then, or AOC, then maybe they'll let everybody go nuclear. Who knows? But we have established a new American posture going forward.
Right.
That is beyond paper.
Right. You might even call it a doctrine. Not to get back to our conversation yesterday.
Beyond mad. No, but it's like so.
Trump saying we're not going to let you get the weapon. We're not going to get you weapons grade uranium and actually detonate a bomb. Before we go to New York, I want to talk a little bit about intra-administration dynamics, which I think are really interesting. A couple points. We said how during Trump's speech on Saturday night, he was backed by Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, and Secretary of Defense Hegseth. Hegseth then gave a briefing yesterday morning while we were recording our emergency podcast with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane. It was a very good briefing, very effective.
Raisin Kane.
I mean, and you see the division, and I think why Hegseth is there. Because Hegseth is there, he laid out the case for the act. Then he spent a lot of time praising our soldiers, calling them warriors, increasing morale.
Boys, he called them boys. That's not allowed.
No, not by the New York Times.
Boys.
New York Times kind of saying, no, Pete, they're also women. Yeah, he knows. He knows it's his issue. He knows, right? Yeah, exactly.
Literally, it's his issue.
It's on his mind.
There shouldn't be women in the military.
It's on his mind.
Yeah.
But I thought he did very well. And I thought General Kane, you can see why Trump was impressed by him. Because he just straight to the point, laid it all out. Extremely impressive strike. Then you had Vance and Rubio go on the Sunday shows. And what I thought was interesting about Vance was he continues to stake out the most restrainer-friendly position within the administration, even after the strike. So he made it a point to say that we are not at war with Iran. We are at war with Iran's nuclear program. He reiterated that if the Iranians came to the table, Trump is open to an agreement that would remove the enriched uranium from Iran. He talked about 25 years of failed foreign policy. He talked about how there are going to be no boots on the ground in Iran. And he laid out these points while supporting Trump's decision. And so it was a revealing glimpse into his mindset, his calculations, how he thinks about this during his appearances. Rubio was Rubio, very forceful communicator for Trump. And then I noticed that the Rapid Response 47 account, which is a very good account, just of clips to follow what's happening inside
from the White House communication.
Yeah, and so much happens within a Trump administration that you actually kind of need an account like this to follow it all. But the Rapid Response account posted a photo of Tulsi Gabbard in the Situation Room during the strike. And, was she photoshopped? I don't know. I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions like a guest on Tucker Carlson. But let's say she was actually there. I thought there too, it's an interesting sign that the administration's communications team's posting this photo of her. Well, it's clear that the president can't stand her. And I'm just wondering, what do you do if you're Tulsi Gabbard? I mean, how can you remain in your job now? The president has said
You
on
quit,
multiple
you
occasions
quit and
he
you
does
start.
not care. He does not
Yeah.
care what you think.
Yeah.
And he said she's wrong. Was the last one? He
Yeah,
said,
yeah, she's wrong. I don't
yeah,
care what you think.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I
what
don't
she
think she
does? She
lasts.
quits. She starts a podcast.
Right.
She starts just asking questions. She has on Martyr Maid, and they start attacking Churchill, and that's that's the path for Tulsi Gabbard, former Democratic nominee, former candidate for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020.
Well, I just want to say something about this, though, which is that obviously the most important benefit of the strike is that it's crippled Iran's nuclear program. There is this other benefit, which we see, in chrysalis with the Tulsi story, which is that it's also kind of cleansing MAGA because people had to come down on one side or another of this, and those who really couldn't stomach the strike have turned into Trump's enemies or detractors, and that's healthier for his movement to get these people out or on board with him, rather than continue to be a voice or a shaper of policy.
I want to because I mentioned this at the beginning, and then we should talk a little about New York. The an issue that is of deep concern to us and has been a very important discussion point about Trump since 2015, which is the Jewish question. And there is no question that Trump's arrival on the scene in 2015 did something on the right that he is not responsible for, but that his opening up of the rhetorical, or his shattering of all rhetorical boundaries in the conservative or right-wing conversation was responsible for, which was the emergence of openly anti-Semitic voices, social media attackers, all of that have continued apace from that day to this, and are now find their closest expression on these, I wouldn't call them Trump-aligned podcasts, but this world of far right-wing media that Tucker Carlson is the apotheosis of, but Candace Owens, Theo Vaughn, all these other people that are raising questions about the validity of World War II, did the Holocaust happen, only asking questions, all of that. And that this then has caused people in the Jewish community to say Trump is no friend to the Jews and is no friend to Israel. Of course, some of that is very convenient because they don't like him for all sorts of other reasons, and they want to use their Jewishness or their righteous representation of the being bulwarks against anti-Semitism or whatever as a weapon against him. Like Deborah Lipstadt, famously the historian at Emory University, who was the anti-Semitism coordinator in the Biden administration, and became famous because she was involved in a lawsuit against the Holocaust-denying historian David Irving that she won, and was remarkably played in a movie by Rachel Weisz, who looks as much like Deborah Lipstadt as George Clooney looks like me. So I would hope that George Clooney would play me in a movie. That's how realistic that was. Nonetheless, that's Deborah Lipstadt. Deborah Lipstadt is like, we can't trust Trump on all of this Harvard stuff and what he's doing against anti-Semitism on campuses because, he's just weaponizing it, and he's going to make it worse for Jews on campus by weaponizing it. And he's not friendly to the Jews. Again, a Biden administration official. So take that as it is. And then you have all these other voices saying if he's aligned with Israel, but okay, so here's the bottom line. The bottom line is Trump is the best friend to the Jews that has ever been in the Oval Office. That is now unambiguously, in terms of policy, domestically and in foreign policy terms. The speech he gave on Saturday night asked God to bless Israel before he asked God to bless America. He said, in contradiction to months of reporting, that he had been working hand in glove with the Prime Minister of Israel in a way that no one has ever worked together before. And
that's true. We've never,
it is true.
We've never done anything like this before,
We've
right?
never done
It's
anything like
amazing.
this before. Right. And essentially, we used Israel. Israel is like our SEAL Team 6. Israel was in this operation in the end, even though it's all basically, a lot of it is for Israel's benefit. Israel softened the ground, did the initial actions, took all the risks, went in, softened the sites, made sure there would be by eliminating the air defenses last year, and then doing what it did for 9 days before America dropped the bombs. It cleared the battlefield for the United States. So it was it was essentially the tip of the spear of this campaign against Iran, but it is the spear. The spear is an American-Israeli spear. And so that is an extraordinary development.
Yeah.
And
and
anyone who tells you here on in, and I say this as somebody who, as I've said before, I did not vote for Trump. 3 times I didn't vote for Trump. But if God bless him, God bless that God bless what he has done since January 20th. I am profoundly grateful for what he is doing for my people, and my people who are not grateful for it should know that they are privileging matters of above the survival and existence of the Jewish people and the full freedoms of Jewish Americans to go where they wish to go and do what they want to do and study what they want to study and walk unmolested in the streets of our cities and on our college campuses. They are elevating something above that, and I think that is shameful.
Well, just look at the contrast. So Donald Trump takes this extraordinary action. U.S. and Israel partnering to destroy the Iranian nuclear program. The day that strike happened, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the most prominent Democrats in the country, makes it a point to greet Mahmoud Khalil upon his release from ICE detention and escort him and his wife and their child. The stroller, by the way, draped in a Palestinian flag, to the press, right? And this same Democratic figure, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has endorsed and campaigned with Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic socialist, who in the latest round of polls is creeping up on Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary for mayor of New York. So on the one hand, you have Donald Trump fighting anti-Semitism at home and destroying the Iranian nuclear program abroad. And on the other, you have either silence from Democratic elites, like I mentioned earlier, outrage at Trump for taking this act, and at the most extreme level, one of the faces of the Democratic Party openly aligning with anti-Semites and openly aligning. This is their party.
Zoran Mamdani, the reason that you mentioned this is that the fact is that there's been polling over the last 2 months. So the race in New York is a ranked choice ballot race, meaning you got a ballot, you can put up to 5 names down of people, or maybe even more, that you wish in the order that you would vote for them. And then those ballots are tabulated, and it takes several rounds of counting.
It's crazy.
If you don't make a certain number, the people who voted for you as at the top of the ballot, you go down to the second choice and then the third choice. It's too complicated to explain. In every poll in the last 2 months, while Mamdani ended up becoming the alternative to disgraced former governor Andrew Cuomo, who has been in the lead since he entered the race, Mamdani kind of consolidated the anti-Cuomo leftist vote in the primary, and Cuomo is the everything else vote. And so he has been, but Cuomo has been in the lead by anywhere from 8 to 12 to 15 points in head to head or in this ranked choice voting universe. And that is the case with the latest poll, which has Mamdani, which has Cuomo at 36.4 and Mamdani at 33.7. The final, this Emerson poll. So this is the closest that they've been, with Mamdani within 3 points of Cuomo. It is that may make this an outlier poll. There are 7 other polls that have shown other results, including last week. But maybe he's surging. Maybe he's that close. So what we have here in New York is the first ballot test of the Trump second presidency, and how the Democratic Party in its strongholds, because the Democratic nominee will likely be the victor in November in the race. This is a primary race. How they are responding to the world after October 7th and after Donald Trump's victory in 2024. And Mamdani has made no secret, has not tried, wisely, I think, because it wouldn't work, to refine his message of anti-Zionism. He has not exactly he's not making ads about how evil Israel is, but he has held firm to where he is on that, while advocating extreme socialist policies that actually deserve to be called communist in nature. Publicly owned grocery stores, price freezes, rent freezes, all kinds of things that the government should simply not be allowed to do, and that somehow the door was opened into the idea that it was okay to do that by COVID and a little by Andrew Cuomo. So let him suffer the consequences of his own fascistic tendencies during COVID. I
think the whole Mamdani surge and his existence in the race and what success he seems to be having so far, it shows how successful the squad model has been, and how institutionalized in our politics it has become, where you get young, telegenic, ethnic minority, radical left people who know how to make news, and they sort of ride this wave. And I think something interesting here is that if this is if Cuomo beats him, is this the last gasp for that phenomenon? Have we is it the sort of the beginning? Well, the beginning of the end has already happened, but is this like really, it's sort of that chapter is coming to a close?
I don't think it will be the end of the phenomenon. It will show its limits politically, because of course, remember, the squad lost in 2 key primaries last cycle. Anti-Semitic candidates both lost, but there's a parallel here to what's been happening on the right, which is the influencers are not that influential in the end. This is the mirage that so many of us confront when we look at American politics today. There are a lot of attention-grabbing personalities that know how to succeed in the attention economy by saying outlandish things, or by spending all of their time online, or by live streaming their deepest thoughts or their latest explorations of the culinary arts, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But at the end of the day, their actual appeal, their actual influence in the real world is rather limited. It's the same thing with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, even Steve Bannon in the War Room. They make a lot of noise. They have big audiences, but Trump decided what Trump was going to do. And the polls show that Republicans and MAGA voters back him on that. So even if Mamdani loses tomorrow, as I pray he does, there will still be similar Phillips, in the political scene of people who are kind of flashes and everyone gets excited about them and the left raises them up, but their actual trajectory is ultimately downward.
Well, let's assume that this Emerson poll is correct. It has a great many assumptions. It says that Mamdani will prevail ultimately in this incredibly elaborate process, and that the vote that is going to the other major leftist candidate, Brad Lander, will ultimately tip over to him and put him in the lead in the eighth counting of the ballot. It's like the pressing of grapes. This is like, you get the most disgusting form of after dinner wine from the 10th pressing of the grape.
But this whole process is so ridiculous. It means that we are in for weeks of ballot counting potentially. Right. And when you look at New York City, when you look at California and how it takes months for the authorities in California to actually count the ballots, don't you think that the pro-democracy crowd in the United States would actually be good at democracy, at the actual ballot counting? Seemingly, no. They're terrible at the actual process of democracy. Their pro-democracy advocacy means pro-progressive Democrat results. That's what it means.
Right. So just to let you know, so the reason for optimism that Mamdani, that this poll is an outlier, or the other polls that did not show anywhere near this result. And the second is that this is the second ranked choice election. Eric Adams won the first ranked choice primary in 2021. He won that primary with 30. He prevailed on election night with 31%. The first count was 31%, and he eventually went over 50 and became the nominee. Cuomo, at the very least, is polling constantly higher than Adams. I mean, I think the average until this poll, which is in like 34, was like 38 to 40. So he has a lot less ground that he has to make up to get to 50% of the vote than Adams did. And Adams did have a moment when it looked like he might lose to someone named Catherine Garcia. And there were absentee ballots out, and so no one knew where those were going and all of that. But if Cuomo does what the other polls said he would and is in the high 30s to 40 after the first count, it's going to be almost impossible for Mamdani to win. So that's the thing to watch for. And as I say, there's only one piece of data, that's this poll, that suggests that Mamdani will win. Now, it could be right and everything else could be wrong, or it could be the latest and that the surge is real. But again, let's assume that the poll is right. It is going to mean something. I mean, aside from in policy terms, what it means for New York City and whether or not, I should like sell my apartment and get the hell out of here and figure out what to do and take a loss or go somewhere else.
We'll devote a special episode to that. What it means for John.
Yeah. I mean, it's been crappy in New York for 7 to 8 years. And it's pretty crappy now, and I can't even imagine how crappy it's going to get
awful
later. But what does it say about the future of the Democratic Party and this condition? New York City was always a very interesting player in this respect because it's a city with a 4 or 5 or 6 to 1 Democratic voting majority, and yet from 1993 until 2013, for 20 years, and then you could also say arguably from 1977 when Ed Koch was elected till 2013 with this one term that David Dinkins won, that the city ended up being governed by the most, as William F. Buckley Jr. would have said, the most conservative viable candidate. Koch in 77, Giuliani in 93, Bloomberg in 2001. and that the city saved itself from its own leftist Democratic base by sensible voters, largely outside of Manhattan, saying, "What are you, crazy? Like, we have to live here. And you want to, you're going to encourage crime, you're going to induce homelessness, the subways are terrible, and you're going to spend us into the poorhouse." That was a white ethnic vote that saved New York. And now if New York is ruined, it will be a white non-ethnic vote. It will be young, moron, tech age people born after 1995 who know nothing, understand nothing, and like Zohran Mamdani because he's 33 and young, and they like that he is a radical because they've never had to live with the consequences of having a genuine radical running the politics of the place that they live in.
Or their privilege makes them immune to the consequences. I mean, This is the Park Slope co-op crowd.
Right. But the Park Slope co-op crowd also spent 30 years hating the safe government that they had that made their lives pleasurable. They hated Giuliani and they hated Bloomberg. They probably didn't hate Bloomberg as much. But that was 20 years that made their housing go up in value 3 times, made it so that they could take their kids could ride on the subway by themselves, that they could walk at night in Prospect Park, that they could do all kinds of things that no one would ever have done before. And they took it for granted, like all liberals do with conservative governance. They take all of the benefits. They take no response. They have no understanding of what got those benefits and made those benefits possible. And everyone else is going to reap the whirlwind. So, but getting to the question of what it will mean for America's largest city, that the Democratic nominee will be an anti-Zionist radical.
Well, but also, I mean, look, we don't know the result, but what does it mean for the Cuomo strategy? Obviously, Cuomo's a terribly flawed candidate in his own right, given his history, given the pandemic. But let's not forget that Donald Trump did very well in New York City in 2024 compared to previous Republican candidates.
Right.
And you see in New York and New Jersey that the multiracial, multi-ethnic, working class Republican coalition is present. And so if you're running against Mamdani, it seems to me you need to activate that coalition. So if there's hope, in other words, it's that the minority working class voters in New York recognize a socialist ideologue who's going to make their life worse when they see one. And they'll be the reason that New York dodges a bullet, if it does dodge a bullet. Not the white liberal crowd that is cheering on this socialist revolution.
Right. I mean, we should say that when you said that Trump did well in New York City in 2024, he doubled his vote.
Right, comparatively.
Yeah, no, he got 30% of the vote across the city compared to Harris's 70. So, but that was double or maybe even triple what he got in 2016.
And I'm sure it was higher in the outer boroughs as well. And that's the same thing.
Only in the outer boroughs.
Right, that's the same thing with Cuomo.
Yeah, but it's the same. It's that map. It's that same map where the arrows all moved red,
shifting right,
including in New York City. But he didn't prevail. Like he
of course
didn't
not.
Great.
I don't mean to suggest that.
No, but look, Cuomo's run a campaign where he's like, vote for me. I'm here and I'm not crazy. And I built the Second Avenue subway and I rebuilt LaGuardia. And so I can get things done. And these people are all crazy. And it seemed like a pretty good message because the other candidates in the race, other city hack candidates like this guy, Brad Lander, who was the controller, and Scott Stringer, who was the controller, and whatever, all these guys were ineffectual and they were not going to end up being mayor. And then this guy comes out of nowhere, and where is all his money from? 80% of his money, he raised $9 or $10 million, comes from outside. So where does that come from? It comes from the very people that scared the Biden-Harris team into being so repulsively wimpy on issues relating to anti-Semitism because it would get people in Dearborn, Michigan angry. There's a lot of money behind them. They have a lot of power. They're willing to spend it. They are enemies of the United States within the United States. They are a fifth column inside the United States about the real security and decency and good working order of the United States. And they are on the march if he wins. I mean, that's the flip side of your, analysis of the influencer thing, is that he could win, and then that will be, just as 2024 suggested, don't be a squad member. You're going to get targeted and nailed if you're Cori Bush or you're Jamal Bowman. You're in the House. You're one of the 10 people in the squad. You're gone. This is like local elections. Brandon Johnson wins in Chicago. He has a 6% approval rating, but he won in Chicago, and everybody who voted for him in the mayoral election in Chicago knew exactly who he was. Now they don't like him. He didn't hide who he was.
Right.
Karen Bass wins over that guy Gary. What I can't remember his name. Like, this is what's that. This is what's you know what I'm talking about. This is what's happening in these cities. And it is the American polarization is going to be much more extreme. And there is a real danger that the Democratic Party is going to look at this and say, we're going to follow Labour in England and the Macron Party and others, and start turning anti-Zionist, because there's money there and there's support there from a weird new Democratic base. So
it's a danger. And I think ultimately that danger would redound to the Democrats, because New York City, believe it or not representative of the United States as a whole.
Boy, is that ever. Take it from someone from New York. You have no idea how unrepresentative it is.
That's my understatement of the day.
Part of this process here is also that someone like Joe Biden, as flawed and terrible as he was, and would say, I am a Zionist. He's of an era and a generation of Democrats that is, fading or faded, So wherever the counterweight is to this, I don't see it, among the Democrats.
The only counterweight comes if they lose. If they lose, if this strike is popular, if Israel destroys Hamas and gets the hostages back, and the cause that everybody rose, the Omni cause, moves on to a different leader in the front, the idea that siding with this is a winner, that is the thing to be hoped for if this is where you're going. And if it's not where you're going, then the thing that we saw start, I think, not that one didn't see signs of it for 30 years, but that staggering moment at the 2012 Democratic Convention when the voice vote from the floor shouted down the idea that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, and the then mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villagrosa, said, the ayes have it, meaning Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And then there was massive booing, because that was what the Democratic platform was supposed to say, because that's what Obama needed it to say. And that was the moment at which the Democratic Party had made it clear there were two tracks, and that this populist track of anti-Zionism was a real motive force. And that is what we've seen gain force and power in the last 12, 13 years. And this election tomorrow in the primary is going to be a very important moment in tracking that degeneration of the Democratic Party's soul. Okay, so we're done. We'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully we're not done.
We're just getting
started.
started.
We're in New York. I'm going to call my friend Scott, the real estate agent, and see what he thinks we could get for my apartment. He's a listener, so I'm only kidding. Don't call me Scott. Love you. But nonetheless, I don't know. It's an interesting question of what's going to, are people putting stuff on the market if he wins if Wednesday looks like he's won? But you guys don't have that. Well, Abe rents, and rents could go down. Maybe, who knows? It'll freeze your
They'll
rent.
be frozen.
Right? Yeah. And Matt lives in
The suburbs.
Glenn Youngkin's paradise. So, for Matt A, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.